And welcome. This is a virtual teacher professional development webinar that is part of a NSF-funded DRK-12 grant project. We are at the end of a 4-year project and really excited to share with you what we have iterated on and developed with 10 middle school science teachers across the country. My name is Kate Simmons. I am the science director at the Nurture Nature Center and the PI on the project, which is called Building Insights Through Observation. And we have a number of other project staff and co-PIs that I'll let introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Hilary Peddicord. I'll be up talking first. I work for NOAA and the University of Colorado series. Erin, if you want to go next.
Sure. Hi, I'm Erin Barter. I work for EDC, which is based in Massachusetts, but I'm actually in New Jersey, and I'm an instructional designer and a data literacy specialist. I'll pass it to Amy. I think Amy's here, right?
Hi, my name is Amy Busey. I'm a co-PI on the project from EDC and part of EDC's data science group. And I am also a data literacy specialist / research scientist / project manager. And I also want to mention our colleague, Randy Kochever, who was part of EDC and a huge part of this project until very recently, who can't be there today or here today. And I will pass it to Jessica Sickler.
Hey all, my name is Jessica Sickler. I am a researcher and evaluator that works in both the informal education space and the formal education space, including a segment of our work focused on data literacy research. I was a co-PI who led the research part of this project. And I will hand it back to Kate.
Sure, and there are 2 other people from Nurture Nature Center that are a key part of the project that couldn't make it. Rachel Hogan-Carr, our executive director, and then Carrie Maxfield, who's our art director. So all of the beautiful graphics that you see and the toolbox that you'll get at the end are thanks to her beautiful design skills. So just need to give her a big shout out. Also, stay to the end to find out more about the professional development credits that you can get through University of Colorado. Hilary will talk more about that at the end. We are going to have you step into the role as a student and participate actively in some of the components of this Building Insights Through Observation model. It's much longer than just we can accommodate in this 1 hour, but you'll get a taste for what we have as part of this program. And then we will talk a bit about some of the other components, data sketches. We'll share about a digital online resource that we've developed called the Teacher's Toolbox. And then we have some of our teacher partners who have joined us who will give a little bit about their experience in the classroom because they were critical to the success of this and tested and iterated with us and gave us lots of really great suggestions and feedback. Jessica is going to talk a little bit about our findings, which are still kind of preliminary, but they're really promising and exciting. And then we will give you credit for being here and hope that you use some of this. So I'll turn it over to Hilary.
Yeah, so let's dive in. You're a student. If you choose to participate, please just raise your hand, and you don't have to turn on your camera, but we do need you to speak because it's pretty difficult to work with the chat in this. So we're trying something new, perhaps for you. Keep your mind open. There are no right or wrong answers here. So all ideas are welcome. Be respectful of other ideas. And it's okay if you disagree or also if you build on other people's ideas. So normally I would give a full minute. We're probably going to take a little less than that to quietly observe. Anyone's brave enough to go first? What's going on here? Looks like you can't see my pointer. Patrick, thank you for starting us off.
Sure. It looks to me like there's a lot of water that the person is standing in and broken windows. So seems like something major happened to disrupt things. Not sure what's going on with the hands there. But those are the first things I observed.
Okay. So I'm sorry you can't see my pointer. I didn't realize that would be the case with sharing a tab, but I am pointing at what I heard you say was that you saw a lot of water and some broken glass. You weren't really sure what was going on with the hands, but you did bring up what looks like hands. And I was hoping you might tell me, what do you see that makes you say water? There's a lot of water.
Because the person standing in the doorway there has a reflection in front of them, as do the bars in front of him. So it looks like he's standing in the water a little bit there.
Okay, so your evidence that this appears to be water is that the person in sort of the center of this image is looks like he's standing in water because there is a reflection, and you also mentioned the bars in front of him having a reflection. Thank you. And I think I forgot to say you thought there was something serious going on, or something bad had happened, I believe is what you said. What more can we find? Dave.
Looking at this picture, I noticed that the man's shirt has brown stains on the bottom that doesn't look like it's part of the design. So it said to me, maybe this person was in muddy water that was up to his waist. And that kind of just made me not see as much else in the picture, but focus in on that. And wow, he's been through a lot.
Okay, so you're drawing our attention really dramatically to this figure, and you're noticing this orange tint on the bottom of their shirt, and also sort of the orange on the pants, and mentioning that this kind of makes you feel something a little bit, that really this person has been through a lot. And that's really your main focus. Thank you. What more can we find, Carla?
There, sorry, I was trying to unmute. I don't know why I'm focusing on this, but it looks like there's drapes on the right there around that window, which seems odd to me if that's the outside of a window. I'm getting a sense of I'm not inside out. Like I'm not sure which is outside and which is inside.
Okay. Great, thank you. So you're drawing our attention, I believe you said, to the right side of the image, and that you mentioned drapes, and also that you're a little confused as to whether we're inside or outside, maybe of this broken glass. Can you tell me what you see that makes you say drapes?
Maybe I'm looking on a small screen, but those pieces of green around the window look like drapes to me, pulled aside. You know, I don't know if this is somewhere in the East Coast and those are shutters. I apologize because I don't have that experience.
Okay, yeah. So
but they do look like drapes, and I was trying to look inside that window where it's dark. And again, I'm not sure. Are we inside or outside?
Right. Thank you. So your further evidence for the drapes or the shutters is that they're sort of blue-green, and you're still thinking that really looking inside the window, wondering, you know, what's going on. Are we inside or are we outside of this location? Thank you. What more can we find, Sarah?
I really felt like I was standing across the street from this guy, looking maybe from a neighbor's window into his house.
Okay. So you get the feeling that you're actually inside somewhere of your own and you're across the street and that you're looking from inside a window. What do you see that makes you say that you're looking at it from in out?
I think it's the glass, the pieces of glass in front of me. They're closer to me than he is. And it seems like both of our windows are broken, mine and his. So I'm close by, but I think I'm inside.
Great. This has been super fun. I really love this artwork, and we could go on for 45 minutes probably. But I am going to keep moving. I think you get a little taste for this, and I appreciate you all have done a very nice job of communicating your thoughts. So this, by the way, this piece is called Helicopter Hands by Roland Golden, and it's courtesy of the Historic New Orleans collection. So what we would do to step a little bit out of you being a student and get a little bit more into a quicker version of letting you know what's next would be that we would use these same questions. And this strategy, by the way, is called visual thinking strategies. And we are providing links to figure out how to do this and giving credit for the organization who came up with this wonderful observation technique. So what you would do if you used our approach, the way that we've created it with the teachers, you would use an artwork and do visual thinking strategies with those 3 questions. I'm guessing you've probably noticed that there wasn't anything from me that said, that's great, you really nailed it with that. I'm pretty much staying neutral, but listening and paraphrasing back. And it just kind of gets this really fun, mysterious, brewy thing going on with students because they're so used to hearing, yeah, the right answer. So the next thing we would do is put up some sort of data set. And in this project, we used global data visualizations. And so I would essentially do the same thing with this. So I would ask you, what's going on? What do you see that makes you say that? And what more can we find? And then after a little while, I would go ahead and put the legend in. You can always start with the legend too. That's never a problem. But I would add the legend in because I think that that's kind of a slow reveal. And then you would finish VTS by saying thank you. So building insights through observation is what we call our project. It's, as Kate said, it's a design-based research project that we iteratively developed, tested, and refined a cross-disciplinary art and science instructional framework and professional development model that and an adaptive toolbox created with these middle school science teachers. So we will be showing you the toolbox, but just for a little bit of context, it's really a 4-step process, and we did most of step 1 just now. So there's a silent reflection, the pictures, thank you, wrapping up without really necessarily answering any questions, but instead creating a parking lot of questions based on students, what students might have questions about, but keeping that sometimes a little bit of a mystery to go to the next thing. So we're going to do this bridging approach, and I'm quickly going to flip to this slide because it is great if you can do this with us. So if you have paper, if you have a black marker, if you can just, grab a little piece of paper and rip it off and make some 4 squares. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it's fun if you want to participate in this. So red and blue markers are optional. A ruler is optional if you want to make it nice. But a nice long strip of paper and a black Sharpie. So here are some questions that we came up with, and this is to gather your data or students' data and be able to visualize student data. So you are the student today, or at least for this portion. Would you rather live somewhere super cold with no heater or somewhere super hot with no AC? If you would rather live somewhere super cold, put either color the first block blue, or you could put a C if you don't have blue marker. And if you'd rather somewhere super hot, mark the first one red or put an H. Which do you think is warming faster due to human-caused global warming, the atmosphere or the ocean? For an atmosphere, draw a cloud. For ocean, draw a wave. Do you think weather-related disasters have gone up, stayed the same, or gone down in the last 10 years? Gone up, nice arrow pointing up, stayed the same, equals. Gone down, an arrow pointing down. And finally, which natural disaster would you least like to experience? A hurricane, an earthquake, a volcano, or a fire? And if anyone wants to show theirs, you can put it up here so we can kind of see. Oh, we have a lot of the same ones there, Jessica. Thank you. Awesome. All right. So once the strips of paper have been recorded, you can hang them in the classroom and have students analyze the data, pick out patterns in their class's data. You could also do a visual thinking strategies. What's going on here? What do you see that makes you say that? You could do statistics. There are a number of things you could do. We have heard from our teachers that this is a really fun thing in getting to know you in the beginning. And so they use, hopefully they will mention this later, but I think they use this throughout. Yeah, that's your classroom, Dave, throughout the year. And I just wanted to end basically here. We found, I think, through this process that 7th graders and up, there is an opportunity where you might allow them in partners or in groups to come up with ideas for the design choices for the answers, as opposed to giving them, like I did with you. I told you exactly what I wanted you to put in those squares, but you could take longer and decide on the design tools. And this, the design choices based on these design tools. And of course, this is actually included in the package of our materials. So we have gone through sort of most of the first one and the second one, and we are going to turn it over to Kate to talk a little bit about the data sketching.
Thanks, Hilary. Could you actually go back slide? I just want to reiterate a couple of things on the earlier ones. So in that step 1, observation and discussion, I know it's hard if you're a science teacher to not say something is right or wrong, but it's really a crucial part of the process to let the students observe and generate discussion and not give them like what the right answer is. But at the end of that process, after you go through showing an art image and showing a data set and having those discussions, if there's still things that you feel like they're missing, there's an opportunity there to have a parking lot of questions and ask the students, do we still have questions about these things? Like maybe they weren't able to hone in on that was actually hurricanes that we were seeing, or there were questions about why they were where they were. You can put that in a parking lot, sticky notes, however, whiteboard, however you want to do it. And if there's particular content that you need to address or you want to get across, you can add your own questions. Be like, I have questions. I want to know, how we measure hurricanes or something like that. And then just wanted to add in too, it's really great if you leave the legend off when you're doing the data set discussion first, because if you put the legend, it kind of really shortens the discussion because the answer is most likely there. So not having identifiers makes them really look at the design. And then before you jump into the bridging approach, you actually need to show that design tools handout. So Hilary, if you could go back one slide. This tool handout is really critical piece of it because it gets the students thinking about the design choices that people make in displaying data. And so that whole fence post activity is to get them starting to think about, how am I going to display my data? And you start on an individual level, and then you're showing collectively as a class. And like Hilary said, you can work as a class together to decide which choices we want for this particular answer. Is it a color? Is it a shape? Is it intensity, pattern? What makes sense for illustrating this type of data? And then when you go to the next phase, which is data sketches, you bring up those design tools again. So if you can go to the next slide. And so data sketches admittedly takes the longest piece of this whole process. And in this, you have students working both independently and collaboratively. You put them in groups of 3, although our teacher partners did kind of vary that amount a little bit and were able to adapt. But you're really digging into the maps that you did the observation discussion around. And you have a discussion about what design tools were used there. You're trying to get the students to realize that there are choices behind this and not that, well, that's how it's supposed to look. That you could show this in a different way. That there are other ways to show it that might be better, maybe not, but it is a choice. And so that's really opening up their eyes. So getting them to think about, what design tools were used, why they were used for this data. Some tools are better than others for particular data sets. And that card really helps with that discussion. Next slide. So I ask you all, you can put this in the chat if you want. If you wanted to do some sort of comparison. So when the students are in their groups of 3, they have 3 different map data sets and each student has a different one. And ultimately, you want them to be able to layer them on top of each other and see if there are associations or correlations. So we started with the hurricane tracks. Are there other data sets that you would layer with hurricane tracks to get across some scientific phenomena? Anybody? Scale of damage, sea surface temperature, any others? Populations, water height, winds, season, dates. Okay, so are other people only seeing our faces and not the data set? Somebody said they can't see the map. All right, so if you go to the next slide, Hilary. I've chosen sea surface temperature. So what's I think Sarah put in that. And then the next one I chose was population density. So I think Dave said that too. Well, we recommend that at least one of the mapped data sets have a human component to it to help with the narrative and reflecting and making it relevant to the students if possible, but it's not required. That's just what we found had been pretty effective. So you have large printouts of each of these maps and you give them to each student in your group. And you have them work on a new legend. So they understand the data set and now we're asking them to find a new way to imagine that map. So they start off first with the legend and they think through those design tools that you've talked about, and then they're gonna remap it themselves. So the next slide shows a template that we have in our toolbox that you would print out and you would get tracing paper, put it on top of this, and the students would redraw the map with their new tools, with their new legends that they created. Obviously, this takes a bit of time, and some of our teachers had it as homework that they could take home. But this process was really positively reviewed by our students, and Jessica will talk more about that. And it really makes them slow down and look at the data in more detail and see things that they probably wouldn't have seen if they're just looking at it really quickly and getting that like major takeaway. And so they notice things more, they're understanding geography more. Lots of really great added benefits to this activity. Next slide. So after they've done their sketching, you have them reflect. So they reflect with a couple of prompts. I see in my map, I wonder if this data is interesting because they work within their groups to on those reflections. And then next, in the next slide, they will, after they've discussed it, they'll layer the tracing paper. So that's why we use tracing paper, not only to have the outlines behind it, but also so that they can layer it. So you would layer the hurricanes and the temperatures and think about like, are there correlations here? What are we noticing? Then you could do it with population density. Then you'll have the students report out as a group to the rest of the class. They can talk about why they chose the design they did, if they discovered anything interesting in their map, were they able to find correlations between the different maps, and what the maps tell them about the topic that you're focusing on. And there are some examples there of actual student remapped data. And then you can go back to your parking lot. So if you still had questions, maybe some of the other maps that you assign the students help answer those questions. So if there was a question about like why the hurricane tracks were where they were, maybe you add a data set with winds and you can talk about circulation and you answered that question. If you didn't answer the question, you could use this as a jumping off point to another lesson or a different assignment to figure out how do we answer those questions. And that is the crux of the model. We flew through it really fast, but we do have online resources, videos, and other things. And we're really proud of this. If you want to explore it on your own, there's a QR code there. I'll put a link in the chat too, but we're going to give you a tour and Amy is going to lead that right now.
Thank you, Kate. I think Hilary, you might need to stop sharing your screen before I can share mine. All right, let's see. Okay, can you see my screen?
I can't, no.
No.
Yep.
No? Okay. All right, so thanks, Kate, and thank you for putting a link in the chat. I'll go through this pretty quickly because I want to make sure we have time to hear from our teacher partners as well as about the research, but we did just want to give you a quick tour of the toolbox. we think there's a lot of really great information and resources here if you're learning or interested in learning more or trying this approach. So the shout out again to Carrie Maxfield, our colleague who couldn't be here today for the incredible work she did on the toolbox. It's housed on the Nurture Nature Center website. And on the landing page, you'll find an overview of the program, some information about the collaborators involved, and a little bit more information about the theory and approaches underlying the materials that we developed. And then from there, you can sort of move through this navigation across the top to access some of the other materials and resources. And I'll start with the curriculum. And here's where you'll find everything about the lesson sequence that that Hilary and Kate just took you through quickly. And again, you'll get an overview of the 4 steps that are part of the bio sequence. And from there, you can take a deeper dive into any one of these activities: the VTS style observation and discussion, the fence posts, the data sketches, and then the culminating discussion. And on those pages, it will really take you through step by step how to implement this in your classroom. And along the way, at strategic points in the instructions, you'll find links to some really important resources, like the design tools handout, some instructional videos, and some other resources that I'll go through in more detail later. But this is where you'll find the detailed instructions about how to do this approach in your classroom, as well as templates and materials that you can use to design your own lessons. Also, in the curriculum section, we have a really nice collection of fully developed lesson plans that were created by our teacher partners. And these lessons have been tested in classrooms multiple times for most of them. And for each of these lessons, you have some information about guiding questions, standards alignment, the artwork and the data that are featured in the lessons, all of these student sheets, the templates, the maps that you'll need to try this in your classroom. And then for many of them, we also have some ideas for assessment and some advice for educators from the teachers that wrote the lesson and did them in the classrooms themselves. So I'd really encourage you to take a look at those. So as I mentioned, sort of embedded throughout these instructional materials are links to resources like a collection of data sets that we've curated that accompany the lessons that are included in the toolbox, as well as a collection of artwork that align with key science topics that you might design a lesson around. These can also be accessed. So a lot of these really important resources are in the resources section of the toolbox. You'll find quick links to the instructions for each step of the lesson sequence, all of the templates you would need to design your own lessons, and the materials you would use, the templates you would use in your classroom, the student worksheets, and then there are a few resources that I wanted to highlight here in the additional materials. There's a library of art images that I mentioned, which has different science topics and artwork associated with those. Oh, internet. There's also a library of data sets that have already been prepared by our team. You can access those here. And then another really, I think, great resource is this fence post question idea bank. One thing that we discovered is trickier than you might think is writing good survey questions. And so Jessica, who's on the webinar with us today, and her colleague Michelle put together this really great resource of survey questions that could be used for either used in a fence post activity or used as inspiration to create your own questions. And there's some other resources here as well. And then finally, we hope you'll keep in touch and follow as we're on the road presenting about this work. We have a publication that just came out in an NSTA journal, and we'll have some other news that we'll post here in this section. And then I would encourage you to take a look at the right sidebar throughout the toolbox. There's some really great information and tips and materials and resources there, as well as a link to contact us. And we hope that you will. If you have questions or feedback or ideas or anything you'd like to talk to our team about as you're exploring some of what's here in the toolbox. And with that, I will stop sharing and turn it back over, or I'll turn it over to Erin.
Thanks. Hilary, you can probably put your slides back up if you want to. So we are lucky enough to have 3 of our teacher partners on the call here with us this evening. And so we'd like to take the next 10 minutes or so to give them an opportunity to share some highlights from their experience using this approach with their students. So I'm going to start maybe with Mark, if that's okay with you, Mark, since you're already visualized here on the screen, we can see you teaching in your classroom. If you'd like to start us off and just talk for a couple of minutes, and then we'll move on to Dave and then Sarah.
Sure. Thanks, Erin. Thanks, everybody. So my name is Mark Goldner. I teach 7th and 8th grade science at the Roland Hayes School in Brookline, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston. This has been a really, I think being part of this project has been incredibly transformative for my teaching. And I think just doing the VTS process after having the practice of doing it has really transformed the way I do classroom discussions about almost anything visual. Not just this kind of limited experience doing these activities, but now whenever I put up any kind of data set, it sort of comes right back to me like, oh, let's do a VTS with that, if it's a complex graph or some kind of image. And my students are getting used to that. And I think it's a powerful way. I mean, it's hard in like a Zoom session like this with a few minutes, but I think what you were able to see when Hilary facilitated that was, anything goes. It gets all the ideas out. You're not asking kids to say, hey, what do you observe? You're asking them what's going on. And so it really is very freeing for kids to just kind of get all their ideas out and to bring up all that. So I think that's sort of the key for me. I think as we moved through the activities with like the fence post activity, giving kids agency over the tools that they use and getting them to really kind of look under the hood. Whenever you see, Hillary is like immersed in the data sets that NOAA produces, and she knows full well the like amazing amount of work and like people power that go into producing those. And I think sometimes kids or even the general public sort of take that stuff for granted, that like, they don't think about the fact that like a graphic designer and scientists and, and others had to work together to like decide what was the best way to represent this data. And so this whole process really gets kids to think about, this is presenting the data tells a story in a particular way. And when they get a chance to flip it a little bit and to choose a different, forcing them to choose a different tool, they start to see, oh, it might tell a story a little bit differently than I thought. And I think that that's a really powerful way to do it. And then the one thing that I've used this a lot with having kids do CER writing at the very end of the process, because you're looking at data and looking for correlations, you're kind of forcing them to make a claim. So the CER piece kind of flows really naturally to that. So if folks are interested in that and want more ideas about how to extend it into that, I'm happy to talk to folks about that. So.
Thank you, Mark. Dave, would you like to share next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Erin. My name's Dave Curry, and like Mark, we were both in the initial group of teachers that kind of like started working with this process from the ground up, and it was completely new for me. But I'm totally like Mark. I'm singing the praises of this whole bio project because it's been transformative. It's been invigorating to someone like myself who's been teaching for over 30 years. I often describe the VTS and the bio process as like student teaching again, because what it forced me to do is I videotaped my lessons, and that was something I had not done in quite a long time. So to be able to like look at yourself teaching is such a worthwhile thing. for anyone who's trying to critically improve their methods and their work with students. But to see yourself teaching and to do something brand new that I've never done before, that was a little bit out of my wheelhouse, um, was really almost, I say this often, it was like student teaching again, and I was trying something new. And I think all teachers who want to do the best job that they can should really try to try a new process, to try a new procedure with their students, because you'll learn, they'll learn, and you'll both grow from that experience. So like Mark said, the CER, the claims, evidence, and reasoning aspect of this are beautiful because I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in a suburban school outside of Philadelphia. It's a fairly wealthy suburb. Um, and we have parents and students and faculty and administrators that really support us and allow us to do new things. So it was perfect for me to be able to try this with my students, because in Pennsylvania, we were very slow to get on board the NGSS bandwagon. But now we're like fully incorporating NGSS in our state by July of 2025. And one thing that was clear to me is that our students just don't, there's a couple of things they don't really know. They don't know geography as well as I want them to. And they have no idea the immense volume of data that they're being exposed to, and how to deal with it, and how to compartmentalize it and make sense of it. So that got me on board at the very beginning. But what I have to say is that the process of doing this this lesson design has really changed the way I do things in the classroom in a positive way. And I encourage any teachers out there, whether you're elementary, middle school, high school, to give this a try. It's going to be scary at first. Like, I actually stood in front of my classroom with the lesson plan in front of me, like I had never taught a day in my life. And I'm reading the lesson plan to make sure I get everything right, and that I ask the right questions, because it's so ingrained in the way we teach science to try to, mold kids and try to get them to the right answer. And that's not at all what we're doing with this process. So it was really eye-opening. And the kids, to my surprise, they really enjoyed doing it. It was different than anything we'd done all year. And after having done it a couple of times in a couple of years of classes, I can tell you that if you teach plate tectonics, that's a beautiful place to fit bio in. I can't tell you how amazing it was when we were layering our tracing paper, and the three data images that they were working with were, you're going to love this. So we had plate boundaries, we had volcano locations, and we had earthquake locations. And they had no idea, this was before I had taught any plate tectonics, they had no idea that there was a relationship before that, between those things. And when they were working on their individual images, and then at the end, we kind of brought it all together, and they layered their maps on top of each other and saw that there was like a direct relationship between those three things. The light bulbs went off. And then when I went to teach plate tectonics, I just felt like they got such a better and a deeper, meaningful experience from that they won't forget. So big cheerleader for bio here. Give it a shot. It really has changed a lot of what I do in the classroom. And the other lesson I did was with the hurricane tracks and meteorology. So two big units in my class. And I've already talked too long, so thank you. And I'll turn it over to our third.
Thank you, Dave. Sarah, would you mind giving us a quick update? We'd love to hear. I know you had a slightly different experience based on your job situation during this, but I know you have some interesting things to share as well. So
Yeah, I actually was away from the classroom last year in a program called the Einstein Fellowship in Washington, D.C. And so I didn't have kids in front of me for extended periods of time the way you would if you were a classroom teacher, seeing the same students day after day. But what I found is that each piece of this, while they go together and create this amazing long-term experience for students, each piece on its own is also valuable. So I've used the fence posts in so many different contexts, We have done them in informal education settings where kids were stopping by, coloring their fence post, and we had a display of the fence posts from a full day of people visiting our booth. I've also used just looking at art and data, and sometimes now I even put side by side an artwork and a data set so kids can get that bigger picture by looking at those two things together. I feel like all the tools here are really clearly explained, very easy to use, and again, can be used in multiple contexts, pulling out pieces of them to help make a lesson clearer for your students.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm sure if people have questions, we'll have a few minutes at the end for any Q&A, but I think now we're going to move on to Jessica sharing some information about the research.
Okay, this is going to be super quick. There are lots and lots of research findings. I'm just going to hit on like one or two highlights. There we go. So this is the big one I'm going to give you, which is we did a ton of research. We looked at a lot of different things, but the tip of the iceberg is something Kate alluded to, is we asked some of the students in our teachers' classrooms at the end of the year, what did they like about these art and data activities they'd been doing over the course of the year with their teachers. And interestingly, what we heard the most was data sketches. It came up specifically the most as what they really liked. And what I enjoyed hearing even more was the reasons for why students liked what they liked, which is over here on the right side. And regardless of what they said, these were the themes that came up in those answers of like, well, why'd you like it? And the takeaway is it's not because art's fun. It was these are middle school students who are telling me the reason they liked it is because of 40% said what they discovered through the process. Like, I learned this crazy new thing about, let me tell you what I learned about Greenland in their interviews, right? That was like 40% of them was just the new information they gained. 32% told us the reason they liked what they liked was the ownership, the empowerment it gave them to make design choices, to be creative and create that high quality product. As our teachers talked about, sort of popping open the hood and now being in charge of how do you make a design decision was another thing they enjoyed about the process. And then another key theme we heard was a chunk who talked about enjoying the collaboration of it. There's a lot of both group work and then whole class discussions of us being in community talking about data. And that resonated, those various elements resonated with a lot of the kids as well. Both the working together and just hearing other people's viewpoints on things. And that process of a really respectful, open, safe discussion seemed to be pretty powerful for some kids. And this is what they were able to articulate. And you all know there's even more going on in there. We also saw, which I'm not going to hit on today, a ton of really positive outcomes in a controlled study that looked at their improved geography, their improved ability to make claims, their improved ability to use evidence to support those claims, all of those kinds of things as well, which whoever's in control, if you can flip ahead one more. Oh, and I forgot, I snuck in another findings. I thought I was done. I thought I only got one. We talked to the teachers, so these awesome folks and more who you heard from, and they told us what they saw bio being really successful at for their students. And it hit on all of these themes. Like basically all of our teachers talked about all of these themes, from student participation, and enthusiasm and enjoyment. And in particular, although not exclusively, students who are sometimes not traditionally successful in science, this was a chance where they were able to shine because it was just a different way of approaching. So it was still science, but it was approaching it in a different way. And then also those skills of recognizing patterns, solving problems, investment in their work. I mean, how often is every student in your class like really invested in their work product? That was also a really strong piece as well. So I guess one more, like I said, lots more, we have lots more findings, both about what the benefit of the process was for teachers like you, of the full professional development program they went through. We have these 4 different research briefs that are going to be coming out, hopefully by the end of this month, definitely soon. So if you are super nerdy and want to get these briefs as soon as they are out. You can either check back to the website, they'll be on the toolkit at some point, or if you sign up, we'll send you an email when they are live, so that you can access them as well. And that's that QR code. I threw it in the chat as well.
Okay, I think we are giving you an opportunity to fill out a short form, preferably after we're done here, making sure we don't have any questions. But please use this tiny URL or the QR code to just fill out a quick form. It's takes about 1 minute to let me know that you would like a certificate for your professional development time. But now is time to ask us questions if you have them. And I also put some mini lessons. I took this the VTS portion specifically and put it into some mini lessons for NOAA Science on a Sphere. So yeah, I'd love to answer any questions you have. We're all here. The gang's all here.
Just a note, well, we get some questions populating. The VTS piece of this is there's a whole organization that does training with VTS, and our whole team was trained in it. So if you are interested more in that, and there's a ton of research behind that approach, and the questions that Hilary demonstrated and used seem very simple, but they're very specific and tested, and there's a whole rationale behind why you use them the way you use them and why you say specific words. So if you want to use that more, we strongly recommend checking them out. And I did put a link in the chat earlier to them. It's vtshome.org. So you could check out their official training. And that is just one part of our overall bio model. So yeah. Are there any questions about our approach? If you have any questions for our teachers, you can put them in the chat or just unmute yourself.
Yeah, Mark, do you feel comfortable answering Elizabeth's question? I would really like to hear more about going from this process to writing a CER.
Sure. I actually with the data sketches in particular, I had the students actually do this as a group because they were working collaboratively, looking, you know, overlaying. What we do is we'd overlay a couple of the data sets over the map and, you know, kind of work together in that. And in my climate change lesson, which I have a kind of a scaffolded worksheet that I had kids use with that. Does that answer the question?
I just added, sorry, I didn't realize I was off mute while I was trying to get that link for the form if you needed it. But I thought I would just have this up here just in case you wanted to know our names or get in touch with us. I'm sure we are probably Googleable. Are there other questions or comments?
Could you talk a little bit about the Nurture Nature Center?
Sure. We are a nonprofit in Pennsylvania. We got started in response to flooding in our community. So initially it was more about community engagement and outreach around that. But then we opened our doors and we have a Science on a Sphere, which is the group that Hilary works with in addition to her education roles. And we do science education for a range of ages. But the thing that we do that's, I think, really makes us unique is that we try to integrate science and art into all of our programming. And so I'm the science director, but Carrie is the art director, and we work really closely to make sure that science and art are a part of things because we feel like it's really valuable. It opens up doors, it creates more unique and authentic experiences for our learners that we've just seen really tremendous value. And this is not just for youth. We see this in adults too, and we've explored a lot of different ways to do this. For example, we did a project in the community where we were focusing on hazards and resiliency, and we had local artists create these really large 15-foot murals that kind of tried to illustrate the community's vision of resilience. And so instead of just having a presentation by a local expert and talking about what does resiliency mean, we now have this beautiful piece of artwork that allows people to reflect on it in a more personal way. And it really kind of opens up people to those processes. So that's us in a nutshell. I can put a link to us in the chat if you'd like to learn more.
It's a wonderful center. Patrick had a question. Have y'all tried to teach this in a co-teaching approach in multiple classes, such as science and art? I really think that's a neat idea, like a cross-disciplinary approach as opposed to a one teacher. I think that's a really neat idea. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, I know some of our science teachers did reach out to the art teachers, maybe just to get supplies, but there is relationships there. So yeah, if you try it, we would be really curious to hear how it goes.
And I think our idea was to see if we could make it happen with just a science teacher, right? That could a science teacher learn arts-based practices and naturally incorporate them into their practice. So it was a big, actually part of our research as well. And so I think it's a great idea as well, but we were just to say, as far as we went was just like, can this stand alone in a science class? And we got to there. So I think, Patrick, you're hitting on like an extension of where could it go next in a more collaborative way.
Yeah, thank you. Elizabeth mentioned she co-teaches with a chemistry course with an art teacher. I love this. I'm going to share the structure and ideas you've shared. Great. Love to hear about your chemistry course. Carla, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, just a quick comment in that I think this is wonderful, always incorporating art into science. I also think that it's a good stepping stone for those who are interested in getting students involved in geographic information systems, because this is a super nice entree into representation and symbolization. And when you're working with GIS, symbolization is everything. You can actually obscure a pattern on the map by choosing very poor symbolization. So I'm just struck by that this is a really nice stepping stone into GIS for those who might be interested.
Cool. I bet they're using GIS now in high schools, huh? That's probably neat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And middle schools.
And I also wanted to mention, because I don't think we mentioned it, and I know we're at time, but that one of the reasons VTS, we use art first and then data, but VTS itself is arts-based. It's actually, it was developed at the MoMA in New York City in, I believe, the 80s or 90s. And so it was in and of itself an arts-based approach. That if you go to an art museum, they probably will do it to you if you get a docent, because it's been there for decades. So I just wanted to mention that context. Thank you, Ralph. Okay, we're at time. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Kate, or anyone?
No, thank you. We'll send out a recording afterwards. And we just are just so glad that you are interested and came. And we look forward to seeing if you try out any of the pieces that we've developed. All right, thanks all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.